Well, good evening to everybody. Welcome to today's session. And today we are continuing the series that we had started last week, and that we are trying to cover a very crucial thing: tech Tailor for Africa. We believe that everything has to be built with understanding, that for us to literally put Africa on the map, we have to have an understanding of why we are building, not just building for the scales, but if we're going to push the continent before, we'll have to understand where we are at, what we have, and what we can do literally to push the continent before or towards the right direction. And how we'll do that is by masking, or rather rooting ourselves into the knowledge and having understanding of the continent. So today we proceed with our series, and an interesting one. Let me tell you that we will try and look at what have we done so far, where are we at, and how do we go about all these things, even as we progress into building. I know maybe some of us have a lot of questions around this. We've seen we've seen a lot of building in the continent. What's your view on that? Do you have an idea of how we can put in place a good edtech facility? How do we go about that? How do we build a structure around health? How do we build a structure around agriculture? Those are the fundamental questions that we're trying to raise. That if we have understanding of this, then I think we will be on the right direction. So just to get much into, not to speak much, in case you have any question, just take time and note it down, and then we'll definitely have a space to share it. Instead, if in case you also have a thought, note it down. We are always free to do this. So just take a minute, have your pen on, or if you are doing the typing, then take a deep breath as we welcome our kiongozi hapa Jo Karanja to take us to the next series within this introduction session for what everything entails around InfoSpace. Yeah, welcome kiongozi.
Yeah, thank you, Max. Team, welcome again. It's a new week, and last week was a great one. And we had a number of questions that we are focusing on last week. So I'll jump straight to the presentation for today. Today we are focusing on how to tailor tech to for Africa. That is our main focus today. So reflecting on the previous questions that we had, we can revisit them. We had where we are. We were focusing on the demographic, where we are as a continent, as a country, as a region, and how we are faring in tech. And then we focused on where we want to be. And then we also focused on who are involved. That's why we mentioned the stakeholders and also involving users as the stakeholders. And for today, we'll be focusing on 4 and 5, mostly 5. Would like us to free our minds and to be expectant to learn more, and to start viewing things in a different perspective. A unique perspective is what I like insisting of. And we have number 4, why it matters, and number 5, how to do it. And that is where I'm going to start today, on why it matters. So we want to build tech tailored for Africa. And why does it matter? Of course, impact is a thing. Looking at the business aspect, you want to maximize on the profits, you want to minimize on costs. But what most of us fail to look at is building for a certain target user group, building for a society, building for the local users, and it matters a lot. So there has been some success stories that we all know of, and that leads me to a number of examples. So for example, we have M-Pesa Kenya that transformed financial inclusion for over 40 million users by enabling peer-to-peer transfers over basic funds. We have Ushahidi Kenya, we have Farm Drive Kenya, and most of these industries that I'm going to mention today, I'm going to point out the sectors that most of these success stories have been pointed from. So for example, moving back to uh, a success story for M-Pesa, for example, why it matters. Let's look at Kenya as a country where mobile devices, people have started using mobile phones for calling and messaging. So the mobile phones are already there. Talk about internet connectivity. There were boosters that had been erected in every single town, at least, that had a population of people, a bigger population of people. For example, major hubs like in Nairobi, Kisumu, and even remote places, boosters were already there. So the infrastructure was there. So when mobile transfer came in, it came to fix the gap for financial inclusion. Remember, people are using banks mainstream. I had to open a bank account, but most of the people want to transfer money in smaller chunks. They don't have the financial muscle to actually get to open a bank account by then. So there was a bigger population of people that had been left out in terms of financial inclusion. On the other hand, there is an architecture that has already been put to place, and what we need is to join the dots. Let's solve the issue. So when M-Pesa Kenya comes in, it creates an environment where people can send money in smaller chunks. Right now, we can transact even a shilling. So it might have been hectic by then to do that. So success story for M-Pesa Kenya is there. We all know it. We have Ushahidi Kenya, crowdsourced crisis reporting platform. I picked this example because it focuses on the context of the issues that people are facing. So you have a platform where people can report community issues. And then we have Farm Drive Kenya, uses mobile data and alternative credit scoring to grant loans to small holder farmers. So smallholder farmers, they tailored their solution to those smallholder farmers. And you see they have a target user group, it's in agritech, and you can see that there is a financial inclusion aspect also for the smallhold farmers. So sometimes solutions are developed and they fail. So failures and mismatches that we normally have, uh, why do some of the applications or products fail? So I've picked two examples to narrow down on uh, this aspect so that we can measure on the how to do it for this talk. So for generic e-learning portals, for example, you move to a portal and it has not been designed to fit the actual users. So we have westernized NGO dashboards. We have uh, platforms built for broadband desktop users failed in rural schools with low connectivity and feature phones. For example, you might design a solution to be used, let's say, in rural schools, but did you factor in the aspect that these rural schools might have an issue in connectivity? When you're developing, if you're a developer, there are some aspects that you have to check. Low latency. Maybe in the developer, if you're a web developer, for example, you have to check like the low latency aspect of your app. Try to test the app. How does it perform when it's in a low latency network? How does it perform when there is no connectivity, when there is no, when the connectivity is not kind at the level that you want? So there's been some failures and mismatches. So let me move to the industries that we see in Kenya or in this region that are really big. Uh, and I'm going to point out a number of industries. So we have number one, fintech. So anything to do with finances, anything to do with money, anything to do, that's why you find loaning apps are growing. Of course, money transfer applications and solutions, people really want to have that. So for fintech, mobile banking, microinsurance, digital credit saving groups, that's a major industry. And then secondly, we have agriculture. We live in a region that people do a lot of farming. We have a lot of people farming a variety of stuff. We have coffee, we have people doing maize, and all these farmers, both large scale and small scales, of course, they have to sell their produce. So about tracking farm produce, let's say from the farm to the actual consumer, there's a whole supply chain aspect in the middle. So in terms of solutions that can be developed for that alone, for the supply chain, we have a number of things that we can focus on. How do we deal with the delivery? How do we deal with the supply of a certain commodity at a region where it is needed? So it's funny because sometimes I'll use Kenya, for example. You'll find we have a lot of changing seasons. We have there's a time that some counties are not receiving enough rainfall, and there's at the same time other counties have a lot of rainfall. So you'll find some farmers have an oversupply of, let's say, cabbages, and some people are starving, but the supply chain has not been mapped out properly. How can tech come in hand to bring this or to solve this problem? Number two, you find that in farms there are a lot of operations that farmers do. I mean, from planting to harvesting, there's a lot of things that they do. How do they track their produce for the previous seasons? How do they track the losses they make? How do they track their sales? How do they maximize their operations? At some point, we might overthink and think we want to offer IoT solutions in this, but even to the data level, the data that these farmers are dealing with. I planted this amount of seeds. This is the amount of water it takes. This was the climate pattern at that specific season. How do we bring these out in a solution so that we can maximize productivity in farms, let's say? So that is an industry we can focus on, agri-tech. And then I move to education. In every household in this country, you'll find at least there is someone who is schooling. At some point, people, I remember when we had COVID, we moved to online studies. So most of the online solutions or the digital solutions for learning were discovered at that period. But EdTech is something that will really drive well in this region. Has it been localized? Most of the solutions in education, let's say, might have been tailored for Western setups, but have we customized our own learning platforms? Maybe as we were growing, we never got the chance to interact with localized platforms. But can we get into this gap and fill it, like tailor tech for education? It might be in any level, but how can we bridge that? And then finally, we have healthcare, telemedicine via USSD, care reminders, diagnostic AI. So in healthcare, both from pharmaceuticals to telemedicine. I know healthcare is a sensitive field, so you can't develop a solution without complying and research. But if you're doing a solution, let's say for supply of, I want to buy a certain prescription that the doctor gave me at some point. So how do I get it at my place? So delivery. And then about telemedicine, do we have enough platforms where people can get to consult one-on-one with doctors? Do they exist? Have we really exhausted the gaps in healthcare? So revisiting the four industries, one, we have fintech. Two, we have agriculture. Three, we have edtech. Four, we have health tech. So if you get to solve problems in these four industries, I think we are likely to maximize on the problems that we can solve. If you think there's an industry that I have not mentioned, that's the research that I came up with. You can also drop it in the chat so that we can focus on it. But there are some factors to consider. One, African tech, mobile fast, USSD, SMS fallback, offline capabilities, low cost hardware. Going back to M-Pesa as an example, of course, nowadays we have an app, but there is an USSD option. You can use the SMS, you can use the USSD method to do anything, send money, receive. Does your solution have a fallback for remote places? Do you have fallbacks for all the problems that we normally face as a region, connectivity being one in terms of low latency networks? And then we have a business culture that we have in different regions. So trust networks, agent-based distribution, informal sector dynamics, communal decision making. So sometimes we need to study the market that we're introducing a solution to, and then let the solution come and create that smooth effect. Let the solution create the efficiency of what is already happening. On the last session, I gave an example of mailing. People already doing mailing via the post offices, and when the email came in, it brought efficiency to the process. So even before we design any solution, do we normally check the culture that is there, the dynamics, the informal sector dynamics? So sometimes when you try to introduce formality in the informal sector, users won't take your app, or you won't get like the positive feedback from users. For example, if you're creating an application, or if you're programming a solution for an informal sector, and you're trying to make your app to follow formal processes of doing things, are the users going to take it positively? Number two, always remember that you are making the application for the users. You're designing the solution for the users. So we always put the users in mind, and I'm going to dissect that also later in this, and we'll check on some of the mistakes that we might make. So I'll cross over to software development life cycle that some of us might know of, and also I'll draw parallels with user involvement. In a traditional waterfall model that we know, of course, every developer uh, might answer it this way. You first start with requirements collection, and then you move to design. You design your solution, and then you move to implementation, and then you test and deploy. And sometimes the design involves doing the database mapping, doing the UI, UX stuff, and then implementation is where you actually do your code and you test. So all this, the full process this is the basic process that we follow. So other complicated processes might be built on this, like iteration, or having security checks after every level. But uh, most of us might argue that if we want to involve users, we involve them in the requirement gathering process. And are we really involving them as we should in our software development lifecycle? So uh, is there a way that we can anchor requirements in users' needs? For example, use user stories to keep focus on real tasks. So uh, user story is where you approach a user and they tell you what they want in their informal language. Most of the users we are creating solutions for might be in an informal sector, and they just know what they want. The users understand what they want clearly. And uh, you might approach a small retailer, for example. That's the example I used. I want to view daily, weekly, and annual profit or loss reports by product, so I can make informed stocking decisions. So let's go to this retail store owner. The retail store owner understands the operations that they work on every day. They understand the problems. They know the struggles that they normally face. But do we engage them in a user story so that they can tell us, what do you want? So they mentioned that I want to view daily, weekly, and annual profit loss reports. So this is what this user wants. And I want to see them by product, by category, so I can make informed stocking decisions. So sometimes if you leave out the user story aspect as a developer, you'll cross over and do this. I've drawn some parallels here. So developer assumption, real user need. So developer assumption will be, okay, I'm doing this application. So first thing, authentication. Of course, user should log in and view sales. Number two, simply list sales and transactions. I'm I'm mapping out the developers in the assumption that the developer didn't gather the user story. So they just wanted to create a solution for a retail store. So they thought that a retail store will be good. As a solution that a retail store owner might need is a simple list of sales and transactions. That is what we might think as developers. But what does the real user need? The user needs a detailed reports for daily, weekly, annual, and category breakdown. And the user needs aggregated insights on profit or loss trends and inventory recommendations. So by capturing user stories, we ensure that the requirements reflect actual workflows. You might have the best, let's say, framework. You might have the best tools, the best designs, the best environments for deployment and testing. But if we miss out on the user needs, that's where we go wrong, because you have a good app hanging on the Play Store, or you deployed it, but the users won't uptake it because the users are using the app because they need it. And uh, I'll move over to 4 reflection points that I'll discuss. So, reflection point number 1 is user centered design and co creation. So, when you want to involve the user in your solution, you need to co create with them. And I'll mention a number of things. Uh, a collaborative approach where end users participate throughout ideation, prototyping, and testing. So you need to involve your user in ideation. Of course, we need to be creative when it comes to involving users, so that it doesn't seem like you're making the users do your work. So you should make it more interactive. Traditionally, we'll say have questionnaires, but let's be realistic. Questionnaires may not be effective at all levels. So some users, I want you to imagine you're creating an app for mechanics, and you want to find them in their actual physical setting. So you have a white questionnaire with you, and you should not like interrupt the person who is working or this user who you are targeting. So is a questionnaire really effective as a method of involving them? Is it logical to make them right, or is an interview more logical? Is a conversation more logical? Can you record? I have personally, in some of the applications that I've been ideating, I had to get into a conversation with the user and tell them that I'm recording it. And then after I do the recording, I play it, transcribe it, and like gather the requirements from actual language, because sometimes people will talk naturally in a conversation. So sometimes questionnaires will apply depending on the setting that you are targeting, and sometimes they won't. Sometimes interviews will work, sometimes interviews won't. So we need to be creative on how to involve users. So workshops, focus groups, sometimes hackathons, uh, and your user groups. So for example, farmers, you can find them in their focus groups. Sometimes they do their meetings and they come together. You can take advantage of those forums and you find them and you try to have conversations with them. And then if you are sure that this is a target group that I'm making an app with, let's say you're making an app for a health setting, so you'll have to co-create it with doctors. If you're making an app for a company, for example, you have to work with the staff that you're making the app for, from ideation. And then when it comes to development and testing, you also have to involve them. Iterate, number 2, incorporate direct feedback to refine features. For example, I might be doing an application, I roll it, I roll the first feature with a target user group, and I might have like 3 people selected, and I kind of ask them, do you feel is the sign up process easier for you? Do you feel that it applies? Does this specific operation apply for your context? So as they give you feedback, you go back to the development and you develop it. So if we just consider the traditional software development life cycle, you gather requirements, you implement them, and then you deploy them. Sometimes you'll miss some user aspects. And number 3, outcome, higher adoption, reduced training costs, and stronger user ownership. So the users will feel involved and the users will love the application that you have created, or the solution that you have created. That's why you find most of the applications will request feedback from you. Maybe if it's your first time, maybe you created a file management app and it's the first time someone created a file, you'll see a pop-up that give us feedback. How do you rate us? That is how you get to also involve users in what you are doing. Sometimes the users will say, oh, I consider this button being moved left because it's more convenient there. And that is what maybe you'll have to do so that you can keep retaining your users. Reflection point 2, contextualization. Today I'll be diving deep into examples. And for example, we want to tailor solutions to language, connectivity, devices, and culture. So I'll use an analogy of a navigation app. Maybe you've used Google Maps, but you'll find some applications are not right for the context of all the users. Maybe if you check, most of the elderly population will have troubles in navigating with Google Maps. And let's come back to culture. In this region, Kenya, for example, uh, is it possible? How do we explain directions as Kenyans? So someone will tell you, just go straight, turn left, uh, take the road, you'll find. So people will actually associate with landmarks, associate with other established things around where you want them to go. And how do you bring it down to that elderly person that you're targeting in your applications? So this is just an idea or an example. What if I have a USSD solution of the same? Speaking of connectivity, Google Maps will require you to have data, and Google Maps will also require people to have good devices, smartphones to be specific. But if I just want to uh, deliver this as instructions, I can have it in text, broken down to their local languages, and incorporate the culture itself. So, do you think this target user group will use the Google Maps, or will use the solution that I created for them? So, uh, a Google Map style app assumes smartphones, English UI, continuous GPS coverage. But if we do a USSD service, it will have text in Swahili. It will reference local landmarks, and you will work on feature phones. You don't have to have a smartphone to do that. So by contextualizing, you meet users where they are and in the medium they trust, and in a way they also relate with. So that is how I can break that down. Uh, Contextualization. You brought your solution to the actual context. Remember, we are tailoring tech for an uh, user group, an African user group. How do we bring it to them? Language. What devices do they use? Culture. What is the culture of my target user group? And then reflection point 3 is scalability. So sometimes you'll deploy an application and a lot of users might sign up, but did you factor in the scalability aspects in terms of people, users, or functionalities? Sometimes you might deploy an app and then you find that the behavioral patterns of how the users are interacting with your application require you to create another feature. Is it possible for your app to hold another feature without disrupting it? Is it possible to scale your application without affecting the cost factor? So, for example, I'm designing for a company. So let us start over from the definition. Design for growth, both in user numbers and feature scope. So let's do an analogy of a HR application. So employees want to clock in or out for a 20-person firm. So this is a company with 20 people. The solution is for clocking in and clocking out. And then in the future, let's say these employees use the clock in, clock out, and then the HR department says, oh, we have a lot of users on this system. We'd like to incorporate features to do with leave management. So of course, people are clocking in and clocking out, and they have to come to the office to apply for leave manually. Can we incorporate a leave management feature in it? And then performance review. Sometimes I like to review performance as a supervisor or as a manager for a certain number of employees. Is it possible to incorporate that feature? And then you need to have scalable design. Microservices might not be perfect for every setting, but it's just an example. You need to modularize your app to a point that you can always upgrade one module without affecting other modules or without affecting other business operations for that institution that you're dealing with. And then open source frameworks to reduce licensing cost, of course, that is about cost. And then elastic infrastructure, infrastructure that will support you to tweak features, that will support you to add them without breaking your app or breaking the whole concept. So scalability ensures the solution grows with the organization without major rewrites. So sometimes you will find I did my solution with this framework. Let's say I used Angular for a web application, and then I want to add a certain feature. Maybe you used Angular 14 or 15, and then you want to use you want to add a feature, but the way you architected your code or your code architecture might not support a change. You'll have to kind of rewrite the whole code. So that affects cost and time, because time is a cost. Resources are also a cost that you'll use in terms of money and all that. And also, you want to do it as the users are actually onboarded on your platform. So you need to factor in an elastic infrastructure, both in the code, in the way you write your code, and also in the way you design your database. So those are some of the aspects that we might leave out. And moving over to reflection point 4, monitoring and iteration. So continuously gathering usage data and user feedback to improve the product. Sometimes there's a graph that we used to draw a pie chart that shows that the time you use for development and the time that you use for maintenance is different, because the time you use for maintenance is bigger than the development time. So sometimes we fall into technical debt, meaning that you develop so fast, you want to finish it, you want to take it to the market, but when it comes to maintenance, your code is not maintainable because you'll have to bring down some aspects to put others up. So it costs you more on maintenance. So when you are building it, we have to think on the maintenance. We have to have a maintenance approach so that we build something that won't give us trouble when we are maintaining. And we build something factoring in the maintenance. And you build also factoring in the new developers that will come. We have had some issues that developers do a solution, they deploy it, but as they leave and others come in, the new developers fail to continue with maintenance because the code was written in a way that other developers would understand. So even in the way we organize our code, the way we architect the software, it needs to be workable from a totally new developer. So even the teams, even teams that you have, you also need to factor in that. So track feature usage, drop-off points, error rates. So do in-app surveys, community forums, support channels, short life cycles, ensure rapid fixes and feature enhancements. So if you're setting up a life cycle, you do a shorter one. Maybe if you're focusing on a feature for messaging, a module for messaging, maybe our app is a customer support application and we have a messaging feature. So instead of putting messaging and also queries, creating queries in the same life cycle, you can separate them so that you focus on messaging, test it, is it good, try with a small target group of users. So that is an app that has not been deployed. In case the app is deployed, you need to ensure that you collect feedback even after you do a rollout of or you do an update on any feature. You have to ask the users, is this right? Do you feel comfortable with that? And that feedback keeps the users hooked to the system because you are making it for them. And principles for tailored tech: user-centered design, solutions built around real tasks. Like the example I gave for navigation app that uses USSD, and that's a solution built around a real task. It's there to bring the efficiency, not to change the way people behave. And then number 2, lean or agile. minimum viable products and rapid pivots. So make sure you have an MVP so that it's with the MVP, you can use it to collect feedback from the actual market. And you know, oh, people won't like this, people won't like this. So you'll save on cost, you'll save on time, and you'll focus on what the users really need. And then offline fast architecture, it's good. You can have local caching and delayed synchronization. So that is really going to be supportive for applications that you want to function in low latency. So if you are doing an application with a database, let's say a normal architecture, you have the database, you have your backend, you have your front end. Have we factored in caching? Maybe you can use some tools or databases like Redis to do caching, so that even if there is a drop off on the network anywhere, the users won't have to notice it. Maybe I'm fetching records. This is an application to be used in an organization, in a company, and I should fetch records from a database somewhere. And then I display them on a tray or a dashboard. So what happens when the network drops off? Do I have to go all the way to the database to fetch again? But if I involve caching, I won't have to make a request back to the database. So I don't need the network for the next request. I'll have my cached data. So the second hit will be in my cache database, stored locally on the user side. So that will improve user experience for your application, and also users will feel that I always have a smooth experience with this application anytime I'm using it. So cost optimization, using open source, leveraging on existing agent networks, and minimize data usage. Actually, there are some solutions that you can tailor. You can develop some solutions on other existing solutions. I'm trying to brainstorm on a good example. For example, people already have, okay, mailing has already been sorted, and you want your solution to work on mailing. Or let me just use WhatsApp. Everyone uses WhatsApp. So I want to create an app that tells or advertises my prices to users, for example. I want an application that will show users that this is what I'm selling at this particular time for this particular price. But do users, how, if you study user behaviors, will I like, as a user, will I think, oh, let me get into this application and check sales? Or am I on WhatsApp all the time? So if I tailor a solution in WhatsApp, that is maybe a bot, if I'm chatting, people are in WhatsApp all the time, I can have a bot that people can ask, what are the prices today? And then it gives them the list. So I have used WhatsApp as a platform to build my solution on it. So we need to take advantage of APIs. If it's an AI thing you're developing, you can use the OpenAI APIs that have already been created, or any other APIs, and you can build your solution on that. So cost optimization, use open source, leverage on existing agent networks, minimize on data usage. Finally, we have a process framework, and I have a step by step process illustrated here. So the analogy I used was in agri-tech, and the mobile app that delivers weather alerts and market prices to farmers. Maybe I want to create an app that a farmer will have a weather alert. They'll be next week will be a rainy one, so you need to make sure you don't spray within the week. It's not a good time to do that. So identify, conduct field research, interviews and surveys reveal that 70% of farmers lack up-to-date price info, and 50% have intermittent connectivity. So step one, I identified. If you keep on identifying, then you'll be solving a problem that you created yourself. So you need to solve problems that exist and avoid creating problems and solving them. That's how I can put it. So step one, identify. Once you identify, you co-create. Of course, you identified that problem around a certain domain. There were users in that domain, so you need to co-create. So maybe host design sprints with 20 farmers to sketch USSD menu flows, SMS alerts in Swahili or Kikuyu, maybe if it's a native language. So at this point, when you want to design sprints with users, uh, the way you involve them is where the creativity aspect comes in. Of course, you won't call a user and give them a Figma design and ask them, I want you to draw the landing page. That might not be the best way to involve users, but it might make sense if I have a number of mockups or I do wireframes with them. So you want this to be here, yeah. You want this to be here, yeah. How do you feel with this? I can have like a mockup uh, for the users, and they like interact with the mockup, and I tell them this will be how the final product might look like. Are you comfortable with that? So you're co-creating the design process, the design phase with your users, and you're not like forcing users to do stuff that they won't feel comfortable with. Number three, prototype, MVP, and then you test. So launch, let's say, a 50 user pilot, send daily market prices via SMS, collect feedback on timing and format. So the MVP that I mentioned earlier, factor it in at that point. And then number four, scale and sustain. So partner with local agrovets, cooperatives for distribution, open source code to invite community driven feature contributions. So these are process framework. It might be complicated than this, but I narrowed down to the most simplified format I would for us to get in the limited time that we have. So for the process, if you have an idea or you have an application, have we tried to play out the process framework? Have you tried to play out from identification, co-creation, prototyping, and scale and sustain? Or do we go back to the SDLC that is normal? We gather requirements, we flow, and we don't involve all the other aspects. So these are some of the aspects we need to map out. I mapped it out on an agri-tech example. You can map it out on your fintech example. You can map it out on your edtech example, or any solution that you're designing for a business or for a company. Let's try map this out. Maybe for a company solution or a formal setup for solution, the co-create aspect will fit in perfectly. But for informal solutions, you need to be creative with the co-create aspect. So as we conclude, so just try to select an industry and try to identify problems. Try to draft user stories in this. Try to build a prototype, uh, even a paper sketch, and then iterate and grow based on the usage. So these are some of the action steps that you can try and take when you want to, or when you're building your application. Select an industry, uh, do your research, gather all the requirements you need. Then don't leave out the users. Draft user stories, as many as you can get. Ask these students, okay, you are a student, you want an application where you can view your exam results. What is it that you want to see that you don't see in other platforms? And the students will tell you, I want this, I want that, I want this. And then how can we factor that in a design? Can I create a setup or a sketch or a mock-up and take it back to my students and ask them, do you think that this matches your fantasy? Yes, it does. Roll it out. Definitely people will use it. Even in music applications, maybe you want to design a music player. Some aspects have not been implemented. Maybe we have not exhausted every aspect. How can we tailor this? So back to how to tailoring tech for Africa. That's how those are some of the points that I could narrow down to fit the session that we had today. But leave us with a question. We are building for Africa. Building for Africa means that we are building for the African users. Are we involving them right from the development process? Are we using these guidelines? Are we really bringing it down to them from all phases? From the requirements to the design, implement back to the users, let them test your application out. Is it working? Those are some of the questions that I can leave us with. And with that, thank you for joining us this week. That was my talk. And that was the last part that we were finalizing on today. Joe Karanja is my name. I'm a software engineer by profession. Thank you.